These days, it seems like there's nothing left in Pokemon to discover. Every forgotten item has resurfaced, every hidden text found. The same old facts told over and over again. But what if I told you, you haven't heard it all just yet? On my channel, I like to fall deeper down the rabbit hole of obscurity in the Pokemon games, and uncover things that hopefully even seasoned Pokemon fans have never heard of. Let me show you what I mean. The Heart Gold and Soul Silver Safari Zone is one of the most fascinating locations in the entire series. You can encounter countless Pokemon that were previously unavailable in wild grass at the time. And I'm going to show you how to completely ruin this place. By using an action replay or cheating device and turning on a walkthrough walls cheat and trying to pass the gate on the other side, there will be nothing there at all. But if you use the cheat while inside of the gate, you can pass by the guard. When you cross over, the grass here may seem the same, but it's when you find an encounter that you see the difference. It seems that Game Freak really didn't want you to cheat across because they filled the entire back entrance Safari Zone entirely with Rattata. This is not a joke. Every single encounter will be a Rattata, all level 20. It is the only thing that spawns in all of this grass. The grass also doesn't operate like a normal Safari encounter. It's just treated like a standard wild encounter. Although Rattata itself is a boring Pokemon, I think this circumstance is actually pretty interesting, because there's no other patches of grass in the entire existence of Pokemon, to my knowledge, that is filled with nothing but level 20 Rattata. It seems that this was done with the intent of deterring you from cheating like this, although to somebody who likes to hunt out little secrets, it kind of did the opposite. In Pokemon Stadium, you could receive a reward gift Pokemon by registering all 151 Pokemon in the Hall of Fame. An incredibly difficult task. The reward for this is a Psyduck, but this Psyduck is actually very unique. It has the move Amnesia, a move that was entirely impossible for Psyduck to obtain any other way, and it remained that way for 20 years, until Generation 9. Where it now learns it at level 34. But Amnesia is not the only unique thing about this Psyduck. She's also holding an item called the Gorgeous Box. I would show you a picture, but no pictures exist since the item is only existent in the Generation 2 games, before there were pictures of items in your bag. The Gorgeous Box is an item that is meant to correspond to just the Generation 2 games. By trading this Psyduck up to Gold and Silver and then taking the item off of Psyduck, the box can then be consumed and opened. When it's opened, it becomes a golden trophy to display in your actual room, in your house, in New Bark Town. A very cool little reward. I think it's no secret that 99% of all interesting Pokemon merchandise came out exclusively in Japan, which is why this video's sponsor, Bai, is so sick. Bai is a trustworthy middleman you can use to get any product listed on Japan's most popular retail websites. It's one of the few ways out there to tap into the endless bounty that is Japanese Pokemon merchandise, and some of the last places to find affordable Pokemon games. Half of the Pokemon stuff listed on this site is cool enough to warrant its own fact on my channel, like this Wailord in a bottle, or this old Pokemon slot machine, or these Pikachu and Celebi stickers from 2001 that originally came in a little snack package. One of my favorite things is this deck of cards with the sprites from Pokemon Stadium on them. This ad's length is 60 seconds, but I'm going to go a few seconds over to tell you 1 minute is not long enough to see all the cool stuff on bai.jp. So click the link in the description to scroll it for yourself and see all the cool stuff they have. I think you'll absolutely enjoy it. If you use my link in the description, you'll get an additional 10% off anything you like on the website. Thank you, Bai, for supporting the channel, and now back to the video. There's a small motif about the Kanto Elite Four member Lorelei, in that she likes to collect Pokemon plushes. An NPC in the postgame of Fire Red and Leaf Green says this: "Did you know that Lorelei has lots and lots of stuffed dolls? Every time she comes back to Four Island, her collection grows." At first glance, this might not seem like anything, but the NPC's statement is actually entirely true, and a hint towards an Easter egg that you can uncover about her character. What the NPC means by this is that whenever Lorelei loses in battle, she buys a Pokemon plushie to console herself. You can actually visit her house on Four Island, and you'll see her house is covered in plushes. But if you rematch the Elite Four 25 times, a Meowth plush will be added to her house. After 50 times, a Chansey plush will be added to her house as well. After 75 rematches of the Elite Four, a Nidoran plush will sit in the corner. After 100 rematches of the Elite Four, a Jigglypuff plush will also be added to her room. But it doesn't even come close to ending there. 125 rematches will give you a Nidoran male. 150 rematches will leave a Pidgeotto sitting on the bookshelf. 175 rematches will set a Pidgeot right next to him. And once you reach 200 rematches of the Elite Four, a giant Lapras plush will spawn in her room to top it all off. Huge shout out to the channel Cube Game, whose footage I used to display this, since beating the Elite Four this many times is an incredible task, and one that I have never done myself. But I love that this task is rewarded with such a fun detail that hardly anyone has ever seen in their own game. In the first 5 generations of Pokemon, before switching to 3D models, every time a new generation was introduced, every single Pokemon would have a new rendition and sprite that matched the style of the new game. In Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver, during the opening cutscene of the game, there is a very strange oddity regarding this that is very easy to miss. At the end of the cutscene, there's a flash of each starter, and an animation of their type surrounding them. And if you have a keen eye, you may have already seen what I'm talking about. Cyndaquil has an entirely different sprite than it has in-game. As you can see, the sprite in-game is a completely different rendition. This might not seem too odd, but this doesn't really happen, and a Pokemon having an alternate official sprite for this generation is pretty weird. And I think Cyndaquil is the only Pokemon in the entire game to have this. But this isn't the only sprite oddity in the history of the series. When creating the remasters for Generation 1, what we know as Fire Red and Leaf Green, they redid every single Kanto sprite from the previous game at the time, which was Pokemon Emerald. But for some strange reason, after changing every Kanto Pokemon sprite, they decided to change just one sprite art for one single additional Pokemon outside of the Kanto region. That Pokemon being Ursa. Ursa doesn't even spawn anywhere within the entire game of Fire Red and Leaf Green. The only way to get one would have been to go through the Altering Cave event. The Altering Cave event was an experimental way of Pokemon event distribution. They added a cave that you could get to after beating the game in both Emerald and Fire Red and Leaf Green, but the cave would only spawn Zubats. The idea being that after you received a distribution at an event, one of 8 Pokemon would switch out Zubat's spot as the 100% encounterable Pokemon, Ursa being one of those. But sadly, the event was never released, so the Ursa sprite oddity just remains a strange forgotten relic and a cave full of what could have been. Additionally, you may have noticed Shuckle was also on this list. Shuckle in Fire Red Leaf Green was programmed to always hold a berry juice, a very notoriously elusive item. But seeing as the event was never officially used, you cannot encounter Shuckle at all, making the berry juice item also completely unobtainable in these games. I'm going to show you a little quirked up glitch in Fire Red and Leaf Green. To show you, we have to first obtain a Pokemon while inside of Celadon City. I decided to just buy an Abra from the game corner, but you could also get the gift Eevee here, or hatch an egg while inside of the town. Anything works as long as you can get the Met location of the Pokemon to be Celadon City. Take your newly obtained Pokemon and walk inside of the Celadon department store. Then check its summary again. You'll see the Met location will have strangely changed from Celadon City to Celadon department store. Pretty strange. Even stranger though, as soon as you walk out, the Met location will then change back to Celadon City. I wanted to see if it was possible to get a Pokemon to keep the Met location tag of Celadon department store, so I hatched an egg while inside of the store, and sure enough, it had the department store text in its summary. But as soon as I walked out, it changed to normal Celadon City. A strange little anomaly for sure. It's interesting when a detail or feature about a Pokemon game is tucked away so deep that it's left to the brute determination of the player to dig it up. And I'm curious if anyone watching this has played enough of Pokemon Platinum to see this detail with their own eyes. Once you complete the game and have access to the resort house, you can start buying furniture for the place. As you buy certain things, certain characters will then appear and come to your house. By buying the right things, you can eventually get Cynthia to appear at your resort house. There's not much to get from this aside from a few extra lines of dialogue and a little cutscene. But by buying the most expensive item, the piano, for 146,000 Pokédollars, Cynthia will then come and sit by it. But the coolest part is that I believe this piano is canonically supposed to be the one playing her encounter theme, because when you walk up and interact with it, this happens. In Gen 3, there are a group of NPCs called the Old Guys. You may remember these funky looking dudes in your game, but you may not. That's because which old guy you got depended on your trainer ID. There were 5 different guys you could have in your game. Each guy had a different color sprite and had an entirely different function. The guy you got depended on the number your trainer ID ended with. If your trainer ID ends in 6 or 7, you'd get a guy called the Storyteller, who would appear and tell you things about your game, like how many times you've saved, or how many times you caught a Pokemon with a fishing rod. But there's actually a much more interesting guy, called the Bard. He would sing a set of phrases for you, like actually sing them out in a weird robotic Game Boy voice. Listen. There's a small quirk with this though. Of all the words you could select for the Bard to sing, there was one that he could not. And that was the word Celebi. You could choose a whole array of words, including every single Pokemon, except for one. Now, I doubt anyone watching this has ever seen or heard this before, because the Pokemon that the Bard can sing are only ones that you have had registered in your Pokedex. So, you would have had to obtain a Celebi in your Generation 3 game, which was only possible through events. If you were fortunate enough to attend one of these events and have a Celebi registered in your dex, you would then have to be lucky enough to have an ID ending in 0 or 1, placing the Bard in your game. Then and only then would you be able to see this small oversight that the Bard, for some reason, cannot sing this word. And here is what that would have looked like. I heard a rumor that it was possible to lose the initial battle after you select your starter in Diamond and Pearl, and that something really crazy happens when you do. The problem was I had only ever seen this done in a Japanese game, and as you probably know, Game Freak tends to fix tons of glitches between the Japanese and international releases of the Pokemon games. I figured it was likely that this was fixed, but I'll tell you right now, it is in the game, but it is not easy. The first step to doing this is to save right before you enter Lake Verity, because as soon as you enter this area, your starter is determined, and we need a very specific Pokemon to make this work. We need a Chimchar with a slightly lower HP stat than normal. 19 HP is as low as it can get at this level. It also either needs to have very low defense IVs or a defense lowering nature. Once you've found your Chimchar, it is a whole nother game of chance after this. You must use every single Growl PP you have until the Starly has tackled you to the perfect HP. You see, just like in Generation 3, they tried to stop you from losing this initial battle, and you may have seen this before. They have your wild opponent flee from you when your health gets too low. In this case, as soon as your health reaches the red, the wild Starly flees, and that's what makes this very difficult. This happened to me so many times, but if the stars align and your hasty nature 19 HP Chimchar lands on exactly 4 HP, one single health point away from being in the red, then begins another game of chance. In Pokemon, there's a small chance that a move's power will fluctuate in damage, higher or lower. We need Starly to tackle us and hit a very high roll, while our Chimchar has exactly 4 HP. This took me hours. I was even speeding up my game in some parts. The chances of this actually happening are incredibly low, but the result?
Holy shit. I finally got it. And my game is frozen. Like, there's nothing I can do. This took me hours. This took me hours of the most boring battle of all time. But it's real. It's real. I literally can't do anything. That's it, just black screen. I'm gonna wait a little longer. I can't hear anything, there's no audio either. Well, there you have it. If your Chimchar dies, it vanishes into the void. Thanks for watching.